Welcome to Technology and Gender Roles by Dave Curtis for Technology in Contemporary Society class. As I sit here and go through what feels like an endless list of scholarly journal items, I've come to realize that gender is a big deal. I'm looking at these things. Gender is a natural kind with a historical
How about this
essence.
one? Gender, technology, and evolution.
By Theodore
Cultural
Locke.
inheritance theory and
And
traditional
what about this one?
development
Interpreting
metaphysics of
Gender by Linda
has been
Nicholson.
a
Gender
contrast
is a strange
of
word within
existentialists
feminism.
and
While
social
many of
constructionist
us assume it
positions.
has a clear and commonly
standard
understood
reaction
meaning,
to this paper
it is
opposition
actually
is that
used in at least two very different and indeed somewhat contradictory ways. On the one hand, gender was developed and is still often used as a contrasting term to sex, to depict that which is socially constructed as opposed to that which is biologically given. So, to paraphrase, gender is what you learn and how you feel, and sex is what's between your legs. Although all of those people are extremely smart, that's how they are deemed to be scholars, we are going to use a more simplified definition of gender, and we're going to go with the range of characteristics that society uses to define being male or female. So when we think about the beginning of gender roles, I am 100% sure that we never defined it as gender roles before the more recent history, probably in the 80s, I believe. But if we think about gender roles, where do they start? Well, the beginning of gender roles was the beginning of humankind. It's a natural desire to survive as a species. And to grow and to develop the human race was part of the drive to continue. So, biological needs actually. Okay, so he's clearly trying to sound smarter than the rest of us, so let's just speed this up a little bit. Basically, humans define gender roles because women can have babies and nurse babies, and men cannot. So gender roles were developed based on a genetic need to continue the human race. Simple as that. So men went out and hunted, and women stayed home. They had babies, and they took care of the babies because that's what they could do. That's what their bodies were made to do. So that's what they did. There was no real big secret. It was just the way it was. Gender roles were created out of basic biological necessity. But times change. Humans change. We get smarter. We create new technology. We invent the plow. Completely change how we interact with the earth. Completely change our lives. Ultimately, as overall human beings. And with that comes a change in how society defines who does what. Gender roles, in this case. But if I had to define one type of technology that has had the most impact on gender roles, it would be medical technology. Why? Because this has had a significant impact on reproduction. Medical technology has allowed for women to evolve their roles because they don't have to spend as much time caring for the next generation. Women used to spend 50% of their prime years pregnant or nursing. And being pregnant was dangerous. Giving birth was dangerous. It was extremely dangerous. In the 1920s, women would experience 4 pregnancies, 4 live births between the age of 23 and 35. And typically it was 3 that would survive. So a woman was pregnant 4 times to have 3 children. And it was dangerous. It was physically dangerous. 1 in every 125 births resulted in the mother dying. In the 1920s, this is when things started to change a little bit. So, with the introduction of baby formula, women no longer needed to spend as much time nursing. They were able to free themselves from the responsibility of nursing since they could have formula to feed the baby. So, in the 1920s, the scientists created a humanized infant formula. Prior to that, it was not all that safe. But by 75, 52% of infants were were given commercially prepared formulas. This was a huge impact on a woman's ability to change their role. And in the same time frame, we start to see the technology for medical care, the hospitals and prenatal care, improved medical practices, all improved the infant mortality, and the rate of women who died in birth significantly improved. So at that point, things became less risky. And honestly, here's where we start to see some technology coming into play that making human life a little bit easier in addition to these medical technologies. So at this point, we're improving the number of babies that are surviving. We're improving how many women are surviving, giving birth. And so the population of the humankind is not quite as at risk as it has been and all throughout history before. So women don't need to be pregnant as often, and now our lives a little bit easier. We have the washing machine. We have ways of cooking food that don't take as much time. We have everything in society is starting to get a little bit easier, and frankly, humans are getting a little more lazy at this point. Well, then came birth control. So now we have our children are surviving, and it is less stressful for mothers because it's not quite as dangerous, and our society is a little more comfortable. So the population of humans is a little more secure at this point. So we have birth control enter the scene. And birth control has been around for a long time, but birth control science has definitely improved during this time frame, during modern times, and we now have the ability to choose whether or not we're going to get pregnant through various methods. So the introduction of this technology has made it so that women can choose to not get pregnant, which then makes it more possible for them to enter the workforce, to go to college, to do those things that historically have been things that the male gender role were doing. And this is where things started to change overall for society at this point. I think women were more free to do the things that they should be able to do, and started to push for more equality. And this is where the government policies had to change and laws had to change to evolve around the new definition of gender roles. And then we introduce fertility science. And women could go to college, they could have a career, and then have children. Whereas before it was more a biological thing, you had your children early, which then restricted the ability to go to work, to go to college, things like that. But fertility science has made it possible for women to wait longer, have a career, amass some wealth, and then have children. And now the technology has become to the point where women only need a donation from a man. So a woman doesn't even need a man. At this point, we're pretty much, as men, we're pretty much out of the picture. Or we could be, in some ways. So in conclusion, I'd say that technology has escorted us into an era in which true sharing of roles is possible. However, we still have not made it so that a man can bear a child, give birth to a child, and nurse a child. So even with all the advancements in technology, it still relies on biology. And women still are the only ones that can bear a child. However, I think we're getting to a point where we could truly create a baby without a man or a woman. Just the required donations from each. So I think the future is interesting. Will gender actually play as big a role as it even does now? I think not. I think that the future holds an interesting view of gender. And it will be something that you can plug into your vending machine for your baby and pick which gender. And I think that it won't really matter which gender, because we are going to reach a point where equality is a true thing. At least I can hope for that.